Siswa telah terbiasa memanfaatkan teknologi sebagai alat pendukung pendidikan, terutama teknologi daring.
Di usia ke-36 tahun, sejak berdiri pada tanggal 4 September 1984, Universitas Terbuka mampu beradaptasi di era kebiasaan baru. UT sebagai pionir pendidikan tinggi terbuka dan jarak jauh dituntut untuk bergerak lebih cepat dalam menghadapi perubahan yang ada. Dengan capaian jumlah mahasiswa sebanyak 300.000 lebih yang tersebar di seluruh pelosok Indonesia dan luar negeri, UT terus berinovasi dalam mengembangkan kapasitas mahasiswa, mencetak lulusan agar berkarakter dan berdaya saing global dengan memanfaatkan teknologi yang tepat guna. UT terus berusaha menjadi perguruan tinggi terdepan dalam inovasi pendidikan jarak jauh atau PJJ. UT memiliki nilai-nilai inti budaya organisasi yang merupakan pengarah tindakan seluruh pegawai UT dan pihak-pihak yang berkepentingan terhadap UT. Nilai-nilai tersebut dikenal dengan singkatan KIARA, yaitu kualitas, integritas, inovasi, aksesibilitas, relevansi, akuntabilitas. Nilai-nilai tersebut menjadi acuan dalam bekerja dan berperilaku. Saat ini, UT menyelenggarakan lebih dari 40 program studi jenjang sarjana, diploma, magister, program dokter ilmu manajemen atau DIM, dan administrasi publik atau DAP di bawah 4 fakultas, yakni Fakultas Sains dan Teknologi, FST, Fakultas Ekonomi, FE, Fakultas Hukum, Ilmu Sosial, dan Ilmu Politik atau FHISIP, dan Fakultas Hukum dan Ilmu Pendidikan atau FKIP. Untuk membekali agar memiliki kesiapan belajar, setiap mahasiswa baru wajib mengikuti edukasi keterampilan belajar mahasiswa atau EKBM yang terdiri dari OSMB, orientasi studi mahasiswa baru, KPJJ atau pelatihan keterampilan belajar jarak jauh. Seiring dengan perkembangan teknologi, UT terus mengembangkan ekosistem pendidikan yang berbasis digital. Saat ini, UT sedang mengembangkan inovasi media pembelajaran modern berupa augmented dan virtual reality yang memberikan pengalaman belajar dalam dunia nyata secara virtual interaktif. Penggunaan berbagai saluran ini dilakukan untuk meningkatkan jumlah angka partisipasi kasar atau APK perguruan tinggi, intensitas interaksi secara lebih terbuka dan leluasa, meningkatkan keterlibatan mahasiswa atau student engagement dalam proses pembelajaran. Penerapan digital ekosistem dimulai dari proses registrasi yang sudah bisa dilakukan secara online, proses pembelajaran baik yang bersifat asinkronus seperti tutorial online atau tuton, maupun sinkronus dalam bentuk tutorial berbasis web atau tuweb, e-lecturing, dan atau Vicon, dan ujian online, serta ujian online berbasis web yang dilengkapi dengan aplikasi online proctoring yang telah diuji cobakan di 10 negara dan diimplementasi secara lebih luas pada tahun 2020. Fasilitas lain yang bisa diakses dalam digital ekosistem UT oleh mahasiswa secara online antara lain UT TV, UT Radio, Digital Library atau RBV, OPEC, dan repositori UT, GPO, jurnal online, MOOCs, latihan mandiri, dan iLab. Selain mengembangkan digital ekosistem, UT tetap menggunakan BAC atau bahan ajar cetak sebagai bahan materi pokok untuk mahasiswa. Seiring perkembangan waktu, bahan ajar cetak mengalami berbagai perubahan, baik secara tampilan maupun materi pengayaan berupa non-cetak. Sebagai salah satu perguruan tinggi yang peduli terhadap mahasiswa berkebutuhan khusus, UT saat ini sedang mengembangkan layanan bagi mereka untuk bisa belajar
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya. Good morning everyone. Welcome to Voice of Postgraduate Program of Universitas Terbuka, the 13th series. Let me introduce myself. My name is Fauzy Rahman Kosasi from Postgraduate Program of Universitas Terbuka. I'll be responsible for moderating this webinar today. First of all, I'm glad to welcome Professor Sugirin M.A. Ph.D. from Universitas Negeri Yogyakarta, who will be our special guest speaker. And I'm also glad to welcome Dr. Siti Julaeha M.A. as the head of postgraduate program of Universitas Terbuka, and all the participants of today's webinar. Today's webinar topic will be about teaching English in the post-method era. Before we start, please prepare to sing our national anthem, Indonesia Raya. Well, now it's time for Dr. Siti Julaeha MA to deliver a welcome speech and then open this webinar. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Fauzy. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Our distinguished speaker, Professor Sugirin, M.A., Ph.D. from Yogyakarta State University, our respected Dean of Faculty of Teacher Training and Education, Universitas Terbuka, our respected the directors and staffs at Universitas Terbuka Regional Center, our respected the head and lecturers of the English Education Master Program, dear students of the English Education Master Program and other participants wherever you are. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. Good morning. Greetings to all of us. First of all, let us praise and thank to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, Almighty God, who because of Allah permission, we were able to meet in the Voice of PPS 13th Seri, the public lecture of the English Education Master Program Universitas Terbuka with the theme Teaching English in the Postmethod Era. English Education Master Program at Universitas Terbuka is held with the aim of being able to produce graduates who are able to develop knowledge, abilities, and research in the field of English education. In an effort to help students master the learning outcomes, the Master Program of English Education organized public lecture regarding the courses that students are taking. This public lecture is an enrichment program for the language teaching method course for English Education Master Program students at Universitas Terbuka and other participants in order to gain insight into various English teaching methods. Upon completing the language teaching method course, the students are expected to have knowledge of various methods in teaching English as a foreign language and to be able to utilize such knowledge in selecting and applying suitable teaching methods and techniques in relation to the teaching of English skills. An instruction is the process of teacher assistance to the learning process in students. There are many teaching methods and techniques that teachers can apply to help students learn in a meaningful and interesting ways. There are 5 factors that need to be considered in selection and application of teaching methods, namely learning objective, learning material characteristic, available facilities and infrastructures, time allocation, and the ability of the teachers themselves. As a teacher, understanding and the ability to select and apply learning methods and techniques are things that must be mastered in order to be able to design and implement instruction that can help the learning process occur in students. In order to increase teachers' understanding in selecting and applying teaching methods in teaching English as a foreign language, we have invited Professor Sugirin, M.A., Ph.D. from Yogyakarta State University as a research person in these public lectures. Good morning, Prof. Sugirin. Thank you very much for providing time to give public lecture to share knowledge and experience with our students at English Education Master Program at Universitas Terbuka and other participants. We also thank you to the committees who have facilitated the conducting of this public lecture. Thank you, Mr. Fauzy Rahman Kosasi, who served as moderator in this public lecture. To all students and other participants, please follow and listen attentively to these public lectures. Hopefully, your insight and understanding about the selection and application of English teaching method will increase. Now, we officially open the Voice of PPS Universitas Terbuka, the 13th Seri. Have a good seminar and keep learning. Keep your spirit and salam sehat selalu. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Dr. Siti Julaeha. And now, before Professor Sugirin, M.A., Ph.D. gives his presentation, let me read his curriculum vitae. Professor Sugirin M.A. Ph.D. started his academic career at Universitas Negeri Yogyakarta in 1984. He got his bachelor degree in English education from IKIP Yogyakarta in 1983. And he got his Master of TESOL from Deakin University, Melbourne, Australia in 1995. And PhD in TESOL from Deakin University, Melbourne, Australia in 2002. For employment experience, he served several positions in his institution, starting from the Secretary of English Language Education Department of IKIP Yogyakarta, the Head of Office of International Cooperation of Universitas Negeri Yogyakarta, up to the Coordinator of Language Education Study Program of Graduate School of Universitas Negeri Yogyakarta. He also actively published research articles in international journals with good reputation, such as in Scopus Index journals. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your Teams or YouTube live comment panel. Don't forget to state your name, institution, and the city. I'll bring them up during the presentation, and after that, we will have time for questions and answer session. Now, without further ado, I will turn over the time to Professor Sugirin. Please. Hello, Prof. Can you unmute the microphone? Okay. Okay, please, Prof.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Mas Fauzy. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace be with you all. Ibu Dr. Siti Julaeha, Mas Fauzy himself, and all the members of the management of Universitas Terbuka or the Open University, distinguished guests, lecturers, students of the English Education Department of the graduate program of Universitas Terbuka yang saya hormati dan saya cintai, particularly to the Open University. I would like to thank for giving me the opportunity to learn and share ideas in relation to the English language teaching, particularly in the field of English language teaching methods. And I believe that there are some limitations from myself, so that should anything that beyond your expectation, please accept my apology. And to start with, I would like to show the PowerPoint presentation. So let me take probably a few minutes for that. Can you all see the presentation now?
Yes,
Is it okay, Mas Fauzy? So
Yes.
it's on already?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, the title given to me is Teaching English in the Post-Method Era. First of all, I would like to interpret what is meant by the post-method era, because when I look at the book written by Kumaravadivelu, the initiator of this post-method condition, post-method pedagogy, there is no definition of the post-method era. But in my opinion, the post-method era is an imaginary period of time, particularly when the language teaching method has, for some language teaching experts, I say for some language teaching experts because probably some will not consider the same, been considered losing its significance, starting with the presence of the post-method condition. And what is meant by the post-method condition? Kumaravadivelu coined this term as, I would say, a milder expression than the expression given by Allwright in 1991, in which he said the death of method emerged out of dissatisfaction with the role of language teaching methods. This provides a solid foundation for the English language pedagogy in the post-method era as a three-dimensional system of pedagogic parameters, namely particularity, practicality, and possibility. So this is the most important point in the post-method condition, the birth of pedagogic parameters, particularity, practicality, and possibility. Post-method conditions, Kumaravadivelu defines method as probably it's something a little bit too much for us, or probably for you. Method as colonial construct conceptualized by theorists, not method actualized by teachers in the everyday practices. So, to Kumaravadivelu, methods are colonial construct, theorized by theorists, whereas probably what he expected is that method should be the one actualized and also conceptualized by teachers in their everyday teaching learning process. As a sign of growth and challenge, he views post-method as post-colonial construct, which is bottom-up, which considers context, teachers, and the observed curriculum in a relevant place away from marginalization. Well, I think I'd like to invite you all to flashback to the method history. We all know that long time ago, we have what we call grammar-based method, which also overlaps with some method era, particularly with grammar translation method. And then we have the method era, and then we have the post-method era. And we don't know whether after this we have another era or we can maintain the term or the name post-method era. From the language teaching method history, we know that the formal method appeared for the first time in Europe was grammar translation method, followed by the direct method, and then after that the reading method, audiolingual method, cognitive code learning, and then there was breakaway from method, particularly for the dissatisfaction of the previous method, particularly the audiolingual method. Then comes what we call principled eclecticism, which at the same time, there was also what we call communicative approach to language teaching, or which people usually call CLT, communicative language teaching, or sometimes teachers in the school often call it communicative method. But actually the original name is Communicative Approach to Language Teaching. And then because of some flaws, according to Kumarati Fellow, we'll see later, from the communicative approach to language teaching, he thought about what comes next, which is called the Postmethod. If we look back at the grammar translation method that was used in the 19th to the early 20th century, that time Latin was dominant, considered to be prestigious language, and that is ideal for intellectual exercises, and also enable development of logic, intellectual capacity, and also discipline through learning language rules. And that is even prerequisite for the admission to higher education. So there is no wonder that grammar translation method at that time, well, of course, because that was the only one, the best method in that era. And the aim of language learning is ability to read literature and development of intellectual capacity. And that is particularly suitable for learning to read and write. And classroom procedure, usually the teacher will provide a text and then present grammar rules using deductive method, and then providing glossary of words used in the text, and then explain about sentence and basic units of language teaching and practice. And the roles of the first language is as a medium of instruction, and then a reference for accuracy of the translation. So upon the provision of the text, list of words, and then grammar rules, and then the students were invited to translate the text, based on what has been given. Then the teacher will correct the word, and again the reference was accuracy of the translation. And then in the middle of the 19th century came what we call the natural method, which later on developed into direct method and also called the Berlitz methods. And that is what we call the reform movement. Particularly, they are dissatisfied with the grammar translation method because they demanded the ability to speak the foreign language, that because the fact that language is spoken. So language is not written, but the actual language is spoken. And that's why in 1886, the International Phonetic Association published the International Phonetic Alphabet. The reform movement came out of the concern by Frank Goin in France because of his failure to learn German in Germany using grammar translation method. That was in contrast with his 3-year-old nephew who succeeded to master French in the same period of time. So that Frank Goin concluded that language learning is primarily a matter of transforming perception into conception. So children use the language to represent their conceptions. And we can see that when children the language, when they want to say something, they don't know what to say, they might use his body, so that they use the body language, or sometimes called the total physical response, pointing at things, moving his body, and so on. So that Frank Goin saw that learning the second language should follow children's way of learning the first language. And Frank Goen's idea was later applied by Charles Berlitz. That's why the method is called the Charles Berlitz or Berlitz method, or what we usually call the direct method. In this context, target language is used as language of instruction. Words and sentences of everyday life is used as the teaching materials, and oral communication skills were built, carefully graded progression organized around question and answers exchanges between teachers and students in small intensive classes. Yeah, particularly grammar rules were taught inductively. New learning items are presented orally. Then listening comprehension, speaking were taught, and then correct pronunciation and structure were emphasized. Principles of the Berlitz method: don't translate, demonstrate. Don't explain, do it. Don't lecture, ask questions. Don't imitate mistakes, correct them. I think this is something that is often done by some teachers, that when a student made a mistake, the teacher repeated the mistake, showed the mistake to the learners, to the students. And that is, of course, annoying. So you don't have to imitate it, but just correct them. Another thing is that speak incomplete sentences, which is probably also not in line with the real situation. Sometimes we don't speak complete sentences, but rather using expressions which is handy and meets the purpose of communication. Yeah, let students speak more than the teacher. I think that's okay. Don't use textbook, use your own plan. This is also good. Don't teach too fast and follow students' pace and be patient and relax. Criticism toward the direct method of Berlitz methods, that teachers must be native speakers or native speakers-like. And success depends on the teacher, not on the prepared materials or the textbooks. Few teachers can meet the requirements. Yes, of course, because teachers must be native speakers or native speakers like, then the teachers who just learned the language and then wanted to teach, he would not be as fluent as the native speakers. I think just like in our country, no matter how well we learn to be English language teachers, we are not native speakers, so whatever we do will not be as good as what the native speakers do. Few teachers get me the requirements. Avoiding translation may be wasting time. So at times, avoiding translation may not be recommended, just like in the communicative language teaching. Not every learner needs to speak the language. Particularly in the United States, this is what Coleman in 1929 has written. That's why, particularly in the United States, we have the birth of Coleman, the reading method started with the publication of Coleman report, who concluded that the majority of the American students studied foreign language for only 2 years. So that developing all language skills needed more than 2 years. So the reasonable objective for 2 years of study was the development of reading ability. I think that was what we adopted in the past, that most of the English teaching program would be focused, particularly in high school, on reading. So that speaking, listening, writing will be second. And also the fact that the national examination will focus on reading. So the goal of the reading method is the ability to read the foreign language with moderate ease and with enjoyment for the very creative and for vocational purposes. Procedures: students were taught to read new language with direct apprehension of meaning without conscious effort to translate what they were reading. I think the procedures of this would be similar to the procedures of reading that we conduct for the moment. And then exponents of the reading method. First is the phonic approach, which is characterized with reading aloud. And then SQ3R, probably this is one of the reading techniques that many of our researchers in past and probably still now use to conduct research, starting with survey, question, reading, recite, and review. And I think there have been many research reports and also publication related to the use of SQ3R in improving the students' reading comprehension mastery. And then reading method developed in the United States, of course, but with the breakout of the Second World War, the United States had to make preparation to face their enemies, and also at the same time preparation for communicating with the allies. Then they invented what they call the Army method. That is particularly the English language teaching program aimed for the specialized army who will be working probably as pilots, as spies, as soldiers, and probably also as diplomats. So that they have to learn the language, the foreign languages spoken by both the allies and also the enemies. So that this is a very, very tough job, I think, for the English language teaching over there. And that's why the mode of language teaching was also different from what you witness now. I myself was brought up initially with the audiolingual method. So when I started my study at IKIP in '69, I faced this, or my lecturers used the audiolingual method in probably a rather strict manner. So, well, we'll have a look at what happened later on. And in the United Kingdom, later on, also developed, so this oral approach developed into situational language teaching, which is a little bit different because situational language teaching is closely related to context, whereas the audiolingual method, I would say that whatever happens inside the classroom was not related to what actually happened outside the classroom, or a little relation. So that there is a separation between what is in the classroom and what is outside the classroom. I myself realized that after learning language for approximately 1.5 years, I still have problem speaking expressing myself outside the classroom, because in the classroom we are drilled and drilled and drilled, and whatever were drilled might not be directly related to my need to communicate outside the classroom. And the basis of the audiolingual method is the structural linguistics that is related to the pattern practice, and then behaviorist psychology, which is related to the habit formation, so that language learning is habit formation using the pattern drill, structure drills, and even drills in dialogues in conversations. The principal features of the audiolingual method, first is the separation of the language skills: listening, speaking, reading, writing, and the primacy of the audiolingual over the graphic skill. So you can see that in the teaching of the language, of the teaching of English, usually we are asked to listen first. For example, in teaching the speaking, the dialogue, we are asked just to listen for the first time, then listen again for the second time. After that, we are expected to repeat whatever the teacher or the lecturer said in bringing the dialogues. Then after that, first of course, we repeated what the lecturer said classically, and then after that, the class was divided into a couple of groups. Then go on with individual students, and that's how the drills happen. Then after that, we have to memorize the dialogues and then present the dialogue in front of the class. And if we made mistakes, errors rather, and then sometimes the long ruler, wooden ruler, may function to knock at our table. So that's what happened during my study that time in 1969. So the use of the dialogue as the chief means of presenting the language, and the emphasis is on mimicry and memorization. You can imagine that when I was in my first semester or first year, we had to memorize the dialogues in a book consisting of 72 dialogues, meaning that in one semester we have to memorize 36 dialogues. And up to now, I still remember one of the dialogues well, which is entitled Bus 49. And then we had to memorize it, because if we made an error, 3 errors will be okay, we still got C. But if we make more than 3 errors, then we got D. It means that we had to repeat that subject next year, because that time we didn't have the credit system like now, so that if you failed in 3 subjects, you have to repeat all the subjects next year. So all the subjects of that year, of that semester, will have to be repeated. Then the use of audio tapes in language lab, as I mentioned earlier, linguistic and psychological theory used as the basis for teaching method. So structural linguistic for the patterns and habit formation, that is from the behaviorist psychology. And Well, the dominant roles of the teacher. The teacher serves as a model, a director, a controller, a corrector, and evaluator. And there was little or no room for the learner's voice. So when you had problems, you wouldn't dare to ask questions. We had just to follow whatever the lecturer said and instruct us to do at that time. That's why Chomsky in the 60s to the early 70s, based on his theory of transformational generative grammar, he believed that language is rule-governed creativity. It means that rather than being drilled with all the expressions that might happen outside the classroom or in the real world, surely we can just learn limited rules, and then based on those rules, for example, like rules of sentence construction, and then you can make your expressions, you can express yourself in an unlimited way. So rather than being drilled, you learn about a pattern of a certain sentence if you want to say something. And then you can make more and more sentences just by replacing, for example, the noun, the verb, the adjective, predicate, and so on. So that you have unlimited number of expressions based on limited number of rules that you have learned. Then Chomsky also believed that sentences are acquired through informal communication, not formal instructions. Yeah, because children had what we call the innate capacity. And children learn a language by making inferences and hypothesis testing. So they try to say something that might not be appropriate, but and then by repeating and then by continuing using, finally, the children will know what is the appropriate form or expression that the adults expect them to have. So that language teaching should provide enough learning resources, not merely drilling. Yeah, and then probably language learning is not only based on language aptitude, but cognitive knowledge, basic skills, and positive attitude, motivation are also important. Yeah, so that learning materials must be selected and presented in such a way that learners can relate the content to their prior knowledge. Because of that, started with Chomsky's idea, his dissatisfaction, then there are also others who follows. That's why came what we call the breakaway from the method concept, believing that the success of language teaching is not merely based on method or method concept, but it can be from the curriculum. The need for speech acts, ESP has different needs than English language teaching in general, and also different proficiency levels will need different means of teaching the language, and also human relation. The emphasis on human relations with the audiolingual method, the teacher acts as a dominant or plays a dominant role in the classroom, and from the human relation principle, teachers and students should share the same position. So they have to collaborate, they have to work together, so that what happened was actually in contrary with expectation. And then language learning research shows that what has been done in the audiolingual method, for example, was not the same as what happened in the real world. For example, like what Frank Goins already believe, that children acquire the language is not by drilling, yeah, and also the development from error analysis into the interlanguage studies, believing that errors the students made are actually proves that the students are learning. That's why came up what we call the silent way community language learning, such as Topedia, total physical response, and so on. This is considered to be maybe not new methods, but rather new modes of learning, or modes of teaching. Yeah, due to this, based on the different reasons, came what we call the communicative approach to language teaching, under the philosophy that language is a means of communication, that learning is practicing to use the language, and that teaching is facilitating the language use. So that, again, the basic idea of language use is as a means of communication. And the goal of communicative approach to language teaching is the development of communicative competence, which comprise, well, I've combined the suggestions of several writers, but in one of the writers believe that basically the communicative competence is based on grammatical or linguistic competence, meaning the mastery of the ability to express oneself in the sentence level. So expressing in the sentence level. And then a discourse competence, meaning that one is able to conduct, for example, a monologue, a dialogue in a discourse, not only consisting of a single sentence, but can have a complete dialogue, though it's only probably 2 or 3 exchanges. That is discourse competence. And also you can conduct a monologue, present a monologue, a speech. And then sociolinguistic competence, or sometimes also called the pragmatic competence, that is related to the appropriateness of the use of the language. When you say, are you married? Grammatically correct, but probably sociolinguistically incorrect, because that is not the custom, that is not the culture of the English people or the American people to hear that question. Yeah. But in our country, that often happens, particularly in the villages. I still remember that when one of foreign students came to my university, and we took them to the village to see what happened in the village. An old mother asked one of our American students, are you married? Sampun kromo dereng, Mbak, in Japanese. And of course, she was a bit, well, confused, and at the same time also angry, because that was a really unexpected question. What is that for? So again, that is sociolinguistic. So appropriateness of the use of the expressions in the appropriate context, appropriate situation, and also to whom you are speaking to. And then intercultural competence. Yeah, different cultures will have a different way of expressing themselves. And then strategic competence, also called interactional competence, particularly maintaining the appropriate communication, despite the problem that may happen. And the last one is the actional competence, putting whatever one knows into action, to the speech act. Can you still see this? Hello?
Yeah. Sorry, Prof. I think you have to reshare the screen. Try to reshare the screen.
Okay. Is it okay now?
Yes. Sure.
Sorry, I think I clicked, so that's click the wrong button. Research considered communicative language teaching as a set of principles about the goals of language teaching, how learners learn a language, the kinds of classroom activities that best facilitate learning, and the roles of teachers and learners in the classroom. And the role of the learner in communicative approach language teaching. The learner is a communicator, actively engaged in transferring meaning, and a responsible manager of the social activities. So it's the learner who should be active or actively engaged in interaction with other students. And the teacher is not the instructor or the director of the teaching learning process, but rather as a facilitator of learning process. And of course, manager of the classroom activities, advisor when needed, and also co-communicator participating in the communication when the groups or the individual students want to communicate. Then of course, the teacher is supposed to be needs analyst. So the teacher has to be able to analyze the needs of the students, facilitate the learning, whatever is needed. So this is something to do with the appropriate materials suitable for the learners in their levels of language proficiency. And then the nature of the student-teacher interaction in the communicative language teaching, that the teacher is the initiator of the activities, whereas the interaction is basically student-student interaction. So again, it's the students who are expected to be active in the language use. So the teacher is again facilitating, for first initiating, then after that facilitating the communication or the interaction. Fluency is assessed in balance with accuracy. So if audiolingual method is basically focused on accuracy, communicative language teaching pays attention to both accuracy and fluency. That's why probably the old, or rather the old generation teachers would always comment on the language mastery of the young learners, always from the point of view of accuracy, the grammar, not on the communicativeness of the interaction. So the use of form is not valuable by itself unless you use it properly and in the right context. Then errors are tolerated because actually that is a natural outcome of communicating in a new language. So that linguistic knowledge is not very critical for communicative ability. So you can still maintain your communication despite the fact that there could be some errors, grammatical errors, pronunciation errors, and so on. And then the emergence of the post-method concept. So first of all, the dissatisfaction on the helpfulness of the method. As earlier I already mentioned that cognitivists like Chomsky considered audiolingual method too mechanistic, drills, yeah. And then the learners have to be drilled with sentences, with the languages which might not be directly related to what happens outside the classroom. Then language rule, well, of course, Chomsky is considered a language is rule governed once again when you know the rules, limited rules. For example, in your dictionary, at the end you have, for example, 30 to 35 sentence patterns. So if you're able to learn those patterns well, then you can express yourself in as many sentences as you want. So in writing, for example, as long as you follow those guidelines of writing the correct sentences, then you will be able to express yourself properly. Because, well, of course, you have to consider what is in the appropriate use sociolinguistically. Then the next one, you have the breakaway human relations learning psychology curriculum. Yeah, so that is also a sign of dissatisfaction with method. And then Kumaravadivellu also saw that communicative approach to language teaching, which is principled eclecticism, has its own flaw as well, because it is still attached to one or more methods. So the teachers, when they, for example, use the communicative approach to language teaching, actually, they still adhere to one of the methods, because principle eclecticism still retain, probably the essence of one of the methods mentioned earlier. Then, of course, because all right, in 1991, even the method, the unhelpfulness of method as the death of method, then Kumaravadivellu coined what is called the post-method conditions. What is the sense of the post-method condition? It signifies three attributes, three characteristics. First, it signifies a search for an alternative to method. So Kumaravadivellu saw that there must be some alternative to method, not merely alternative method. Because if you say alternative method, that is still method. So alternative to method. What is another thing rather than method that will help the learners learn the language better? Yeah, alternative to method. Yeah. Also the fact that while alternative methods are primarily products of top-down processes, alternative to method are product of bottom-up processes. So the alternative to method should come from the teachers, the practitioners who work in the field, who work face-to-face with the students, not the top-down processes, not theories given by the theorist, that the teachers have to adopt. Second one, it signifies teacher autonomy. So the post-method condition expect some form of teacher autonomy, so that they are not always bound to use a certain method, and still it is followed by strict regulation of using a certain method. That you have to use this, you have to use this, you have to use scientific approach in teaching the English language, for example. Then the post-method condition recognizes the teacher's potential to know not only how to teach, but also how to act autonomously, within the academic and administrative constraints imposed by institution, curricular, and textbooks. So when the textbooks, for example, didn't meet the need of the learners, might not be relevant to what the teacher was going to teach, for example, the teacher had to be able to take action, has the autonomy to solve the problem, what the teacher would do in this regard. And even curriculum, there is a possibility that the teacher can work something. Well, of course, this is in collaboration with others, probably teachers in one institution with another institution, to make the decision whether the curriculum they are using is still relevant for the current need or not, despite the fact that in our country, curriculum is always prescribed by the Ministry of Education. Then it signifies principal pragmatism. Principal pragmatism that focuses on how classroom learning can be shaped and reshaped by teachers as a result of self-observation, self-analysis, self-evaluation. Again, not always the ways of teaching classroom processes as prescribed by the theorists. And from that post-method condition came what we call post-method pedagogic parameters: particularity, practicality, and possibility. And the parameter of particularity is that the most important aspect that any post-method pedagogy must be sensitive to a particular group of teachers, so that the theorist may say that you have to teach this way, you have to use this approach, the step should be like this. But we have to think about, for example, you have to teach using online notes, for example. But we have to be sensitive about particular teachers. So we have to be thinking about particular group of teachers. If our teachers are not ready for that, are not able for that, then what must we do? So there must be something that we have to do, that we have to do. And also particular group of learners. For example, like now, if we go to the village, there are still learners, students who have problem learning because they do not have cell phone. And that is the problem that the teachers and also the school have to pay attention to. And for some private schools, usually they collect donations to provide cell phones for particular students who are not able to purchase cell phones. And then also to give them some training of using the cell phones in order to be able to join the Google Classroom, for example. And then also we have to think that the goals, well, group of students having different learning objectives, different goals, should also be treated differently. They have to have different treatment, special treatments. Yeah, because we cannot have or instruct all the students to have the same goals based on
sorry, Prof, maybe you have to reshare the screen. Okay.
Is it okay now?
Yes, Prof.
Can you see it now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, all right. I don't know what happened. I just clicked the, but that's what happened. Okay, and then also we have to think about particular environment, sociocultural milieu. So teaching English with diverse students coming from the village, students coming from the rural city, for example, from the town, they have different milieu, so that we cannot expect the same from everyone. So they need particular treatment. Then the parameter of practicality that relates to the relationship between theory and practice, as I mentioned earlier. So far, the teachers always practice the theory as theorized by theorists. So usually, as lecturers in universities, we find something or we know something, and then in regard to methods, for example, because we believe that audiolingual method is a good method for teaching, and then the teachers have to use those method or that method in their teaching, but without looking at what the teachers really face. So of course, in teaching we can practice the theories prescribed by the theories, but in practicing the theory, we must also make some notes, learn from our experience of using the theories. Are there problems? Does everything run well? Yeah, so that based on the notes, the memory of what we do, then we can theorize our own practice. So from what we have in practice, we can make our own theory. Yeah, so that in this context, the teacher should also act as a researcher. That's why action research is needed, particularly for the improvement of practice by the teachers themselves. So the teacher should have the autonomy in developing his or her own way of teaching. Yeah, particularly whatever can meet the demands of the achievement of the goals. The third one is the parameter of possibility. this is related to actually the power and dominance, that we often think that something is good, but probably that is not always good when it is not in line with the environment, probably with the social, economic, and political environment condition. So that we have to accept what is possible. As far as possible, of course, when condition allows, we have to acknowledge and highlight the students and the teachers' individual identity. But is it always possible that we have to teach to suit their needs, for example? Not all their needs, not all they want, and also the teachers' wants can be realized, because there are things that may allow us to do that, and probably there are things that may not allow us to do that. So that is the parameters of possibility. Then in regard to pedagogic indicators, we have what is the post-method learner. Probably this has something to do with what is the 21st century learners. So post-method pedagogy seeks to make the most use of learner investment and learner interest by giving them, to the extent possible, meaningful role in pedagogic decision making. So learners, we should collaborate with learners in making our decision, the decision of the teaching and learning process, what they are going to learn, what we are going to teach. There must be some kind of decision making done together. Well, in one of my classes this semester, I have a class for the first year undergraduate students, and I was not quite sure about the class is the reading class, and I was not sure about the level of their proficiency, the level of their reading mastery, so I give them pre-test. Then after that, so on the first meeting, I didn't, I just presented, this is what I'm going to do, but first, I give them what we call RPS, Rencana Pembelajaran Semester. I showed them, but I said that that was not final, yeah, because I have to see your language proficiency, and I give them pre-test. So from the pre-test, I learned that they scored very well in the pre-test. And when I discussed the result and some of the passages, some of the language problems, they performed well. Well, so that in that case, I have to change my plan. I discussed with them what they expected. I know that there were some students, a small number of students, who felt comfortable with the material, but many, or probably the majority, would probably be okay if I give them the higher level of difficulty for the reading materials. So that in that context, we make some decisions together. I didn't decide whatever I wanted to teach myself, but I collaborate with the students in deciding what to do. And post-method learners are autonomous, responsible, and they are self-determined, just like the 21st century learners. And post-method learners learn the language as an end, and also the language to liberate. Well, in this context, learning the language as an end, but also learning the language to learn something else. To liberate doesn't always mean that they want more freedom, but particularly to learn more, not merely to learn language. So language is not the end of learning, but they can use language to learn something else, just like the content.
Okay, excuse me, Professor.
Yeah.
Can you make it in full screen? The presentation.
Full screen.
Yes, can you make it full screen?
Oh, this is full screen. Oh, sorry. This is full screen already. Is it okay?
Can you push the F5 button?
F5 button.
Or the full screen button.
There is F5. Okay, I think I'm going to reset again. Is it okay now?
Okay, Prof, it's okay now.
Okay. And then now we move on to the post-method teacher. Post-method teacher is supposed to be autonomous, reflective, must be able to reflect on what they're doing, the success and failure of his teaching, and evaluate the effect, for example, and also empowering. They have to be able to empower the students, so that post-method teacher is supposed to be, again, an analyst, evaluator of their own teaching, and initiate change in his or her classroom. And one thing that we should realize, that we are in the post-method era, but our current teachers, actually, when they entered their profession, they are brought up through a methods package. So our current teachers actually still learned the language teaching methods before the post-method era. So that probably when we talk about the post-method era, post-method teacher, post-method learners, that might sound, to some extent, might sound contrary to what they believe. Again, so they are here now, but actually they are brought up still with the methods package. So they teach still like the way the lecturers were taught. Because I myself was taught firstly by audiolingual method, but of course I realized that there are some flaws, that memorizing dialects, for example, didn't always mean that I would be able to converse outside the classroom. I still remember one of the one of the dialects that I learned in '69. So that was about how many years? 70, maybe 50 years ago. 50 or 60 years, or 40 years ago. So the dialogue is entitled Bus 49 and goes like this. This is that we have to memorize. We have to memorize well, and then we have to be able to present it in front of the class together with our partner. Yeah, the dialogue goes this way. Where to? Oxford Circus. You are going the wrong way. You are going away from it. Oh dear, what shall I do? Get off at the next stop, cross over the road and take a 49. Then the person crossed the road and met someone in line there. Excuse me, is this right for Oxford Circus? Yes, take your place at the back of the queue. Thank you. Have you been waiting here long? No, not long. It's a good service. There is 49 just coming around the corner. Then the conductor says, hurry on please. Room for one on top. Pass right down. One tupne, please. That was one of the dialogues I learned in '69. Up to now, I still remember that. That is from the audiolingual method. And that is part of the package, but for sure that now I don't teach that way. Yeah, I don't use that in my teaching. Now with the indicator, the third one is the teacher-educator. First, post-method learner, post-method teacher, now post-method teacher-educator. So we, as an educator in the university, who educate teachers who are going to be teaching English maybe in schools or in university. So that the task of the post-method teacher-educator is to create conditions for prospective teachers. So some of you might be teachers already and some probably still prospective teachers. So to create condition to acquire necessary authority and autonomy that will enable them to reflect and shape their own pedagogic experiences. Yeah, so if we act the way like what my former lecturers did, then for sure that we will not be able to provide that facilitation. Yeah, so that the new teachers, young teachers should be able to reflect on and shape their own pedagogic experiences. And in certain cases, transform such experience. In other words, it becomes necessary to have teacher education that does not merely pass on a body of knowledge, but rather one that is dialogically constructed by participants who think and act critically. So we have to let them have their own dialogue with themselves in constructing whatever knowledge they want to learn, not merely getting what we want them to get. Yeah? So there must be some kinds of dialogue. So now we have what we call the paradigm shift that I think everyone already knows, particularly here, Universitas Terbuka as an open university. I think there have been a lot that has been done, probably abreast what I'm presenting now about the paradigm shift. But Thomas Brown in 2015 observed the current paradigm shift in education that may provide some enlightenment for the teacher education program by taking the benefit from the advance of ICT. And I think UT has done this. Within the modern age, we must be able to rapidly process information, function amidst chaotic surrounding, remain prepared to shift rapidly from one activity to another, and redirect attention between competing tasks without losing time. And I think particularly the young generation students are in line with this already. So like the digital natives, for example, are very familiar with the current paradigm shift. And probably if we give details, there is some shift from reproductive learning to productive learning. So in the past, we are satisfied when the students can understand what we teach, memorizing the rules that we give. We are satisfied that one. But now they have to be able to produce knowledge, not merely reproduce knowledge. And then there is a move from behaviorism to cognitivism to constructivism, and that will further develop again. So from teacher-centered now to learner-centered, teaching-centered to learning-centered. So it is not merely teaching that is important, but whether teaching is makes the students learn, that is also a problem. It's what we have to realize. Yeah, so that in the past we always teach, but now we should facilitate learning. So rather than teaching, we are facilitating learning. And then in the past we talk about content-based, now we have outcome-based. Yeah, so that when you look at RPS, for example, or syllabus, yeah, what we have is outcome. So learning outcome, LO. Jadi yang menjadi tujuan itu kemudian LO-nya itu, okay, bukan kontennya. Yeah, and then also the assessment is the same. So if earlier we moved from behaviorism, cognitivism, constructivism, and then we have constructivism to social constructivism. Constructivism is okay. So we recognize that an individual build their knowledge or produce their knowledge, build their knowledge in their own. So by using their own. For example, when I teach the same material, so for example, what I'm doing now, I use the same material, but when it comes to the individual audience there, they have their own way of constructing their what they got from this. Yeah, that is constructivism. But now it is not enough. There must be some. Well, individual cannot by himself or herself construct knowledge. We have to work with the others so that we have what we call social constructivism. And from social constructivism, now we have to make sure that we are connected with other people. Yeah, so that constructivism, social constructivism, move to connectionism. Yeah, when we are connected, then we are able to get access from for other information. However, that is not enough now. As teachers, we have to be able to navigate, help our learners navigate using the browsers to get information, to access the information. So that now we are in the era of navigationism. Yeah, so there's the shift of the learning theories. Yeah. Tom Brown mentions that navigation might be new learning, might be here, but I say that it's already here. Navigationism is already with us. Yeah, and then we have in the Postmethod era, we have what we call exploratory practice. That is meant that we have to make some exploration within what happened in the classroom to make sure that we first pay attention to quality of life in the classroom. So the quality of the teaching learning process must be the first priority for teacher education. Then the macro strategic framework, there are 10, maximize learning opportunities, negotiate interaction, foster language awareness, and finally, rich cultural consciousness. And I'll just give an example of micro strategic framework taken from macro strategy number 5, foster language awareness. This is an example how to foster language awareness. For example, on the board, you can write something like this. So this form of address, Madam President, Mr. Chairman, Your Honor, Sir, hey, hi, hello, hello darling, for example. And then you ask the learners to work in groups, to discuss when, where, and in what context those expressions are appropriate to be expressed. Then they share the discussion, and then, well, of course, there will be some factors that influence their idea, their opinion, why they use this, why use this. And then probably some students will be able to give some important points. And to make it clearer, this is what often happens in our context, particularly if you come to the classroom in probably junior high schools, and even, for example, when you check what is written in the English books written for the schools, you will find this problem. For example, as usual, you call your teacher, for example, the name is Bambang Permati. When you address him, are you going to say Mr. Permati, Mr. Bambang, Mr. Bambang Permati, Bapak Bambang Permati? So these are expressions that up to now, I think, are still problematic for the students, and probably the teachers themselves also have problem making clear. But by looking at the fact that I mentioned earlier, that this one, so that you have to raise cultural consciousness, cultural awareness, intercultural awareness. There must be a way of answering these questions. So what is appropriate, what is not appropriate? But again, because as teachers, you are expected to facilitate learners and to give them some freedom, so that you are not the only judge over there, but you have to have a discussion with students. If they use a certain, for example, when they say Pak Bambang, why? Why it is Pak Bambang? Why not Mr. Bambang? Why not Mr. Permati, for example? So that there must be reasons, and you have to listen to the students' reasons. Why? Because we have different cultures. So our culture is different from the English culture, so that we have also to consider, for example, the aspect of politeness in our locality and so on, so that we have to have some understanding on this. And this is part of the what we are expected to consider in our teaching learning process. Well, I think that's it for the time being. Thank you very much for your patience. And if there are questions, I'll try to answer the questions. Thank you very much, Mas Fauzy.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Professor Sugirin, for the very informative presentation. Now we already have several questions to discuss. The first question is from Erni Sarifah, a student of Universitas Terbuka from Cianjur. Okay, wait a minute. Okay. What is the best method to apply in English classroom to stimulate the student to be able to communicate actively? That's the first question, Prof.
The best method. Well, if we refer to the post-method pedagogy, the post-method era, as I mentioned, there is no best method. What is the best is based on Mbak Erni Sarifah, based on your experience as a teacher. Well, of course, there are some theories, some principles in communicative language teaching to stimulate students to be able to communicate actively, whether it is oral communication or written communication. So apply the theory that you have learned, but of course you have to consider, for example, aspects related to what I mentioned already in the post-method era. Who the students are and in what context, because students have different expectation. That's why teachers as an analyst must be able to see the backgrounds of the students. As an analyst, you have to try to understand their level of language proficiency, their need, so that you will be able to adjust whatever you are doing in relation to their expectation. So probably, well, when we say in the post-method era, it doesn't mean that you have to leave completely whatever benefits you can get from any method, but once again, do not stick to the, for example, the procedures, the steps used in those methods. For example, when you talk about stimulating students for conversation, for speaking, for example, one way that you can do is try to help the students by using their background knowledge. Particularly, you can use, for example, whatever they have in their environment. You want them to tell stories. The stories probably can be in English, but the story itself can be something that they already know. So they already know the content, but they do not know how to express in English. So at least they already have one thing that they know. So the content they already know, but expressing in English is what you need to help. So that in this context, you can give them some kind of scaffolding, in the language aspects. But the students can freely express themselves because they know the content of what they want to say. So that you, in this context, you already stimulate the students to speak because they know whatever they want to say. Or probably they want to talk about themselves, but they have problem in whatever they want to talk about in relation to the language. So that will be, you give them freedom. So the topics of the conversation, for example, doesn't have to come from you, but that may come from the students. They can have their own choice. Or they can make some agreement about what they are going to talk next week, for example. So that that's some kind of stimulation. In case of writing, for example, often the problem is, for example, generating ideas. To start a single sentence in writing is always problematic because they don't know what to start. So probably you can ask them what they want to write. So once you know one of the items that they want to write, and then you can, for example, they want to talk about their last holiday, for example. And then you write down the word holiday on the board, for example. Yeah, and then what other words are related to the word holiday, so that you can help them with some form of mind mapping. So holiday probably has something to do with travel, traveling, where, so related to the place, and then what vehicle they use. So probably there will be many means of transportation that you write, and what they do or what they did, where they are going to, where they went, then with whom they went, and so on. So that you have some mind map already there, so that they are able to link one aspect with another aspect, one component with another component, and you help them to relate which one I should say first, which one is next, and then you help them with the language. So mind mapping, that is one way that you can use to stimulate the students to be able to communicate actively. I hope that this answers the question. Is that does that answer your question, Mbak Eni Saripah?
Yeah, we hope that she got the answer, Prof. Okay, now we have another question. The second question is from Ridawati Sirait. Oh, sorry, from Joko. Joko is Lianto. How effective the audiolingual method is to increase the student capabilities on English learning? Is there a visual lingual method? That's the question.
Yeah, audiovisual. So audiolingual, audiovisual, yes. Well, how effective? Well, what I can say is that there may be aspects from the audiolingual method that may still be retained, but of course the way of using it is not the same as the way it was used in the past. For example, I think I myself still believe that drilling is still necessary, particularly when we have to do with pronunciation. But the drilling doesn't have to be done by the teacher. Yeah. So when you want to drill, for example, the pronunciation of a word, because a student has a problem pronouncing a certain word, and then you can ask them to click the word in the dictionary, particularly dictionary with pronunciation. Well, I think the digital native would be able to do that. Just ask them to click. Is there a problem with the video? Yeah. Are you still with us?
Yes, Prof.
Okay, all right. Okay. So, yeah.
Okay, we have another question.
Sorry, I haven't finished with that. So you can ask the student to click the word, the pronunciation of the word, yeah, so that it is the learner herself or himself who would repeat the pronunciation of the word and try to repeat the pronunciation of the words that means that the learners will be drilling himself or herself. So that is one example of the effectiveness of audiolingual method. But the others must be considered. But that is an example. So you don't have to leave everything, to put everything away. There is something that we can learn from all the methods coming earlier, but we do not have to take them all. We don't have to think that any of them would be the best method. But there are still benefits that we can get out of those methods. I hope that that's answered the questions. Yes, of course, there are audiovisual method. Well, if you, I haven't provided the access to those, but there will be, well, probably my suggestion is write audiolingual method in the Google, and then you will find audiovisual examples of how to teach in audiolingual method. As, for example, the one written by Larson Freeman, and you can access, you can download that free. There are examples, Gestopedia. Yeah, just type it, and then you'll get it.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Sugirin. Okay, now we have another question. It is from Hari, student of Agribusiness of UT. I would like to ask about, is it effective if we learn or practice English by singing our English favorite songs as often as possible?
Yes, it depends on what you want to learn, but that is one way, because by learning the language by singing your favorite songs, at least you will be able to learn the pronunciation, and also not only the pronunciation, but often you learn some of the pronunciation features, yeah, that often have problems, because in the songs you often cluster words, 2-3 words, yeah, put together, so that actually you will have the pronunciation like that used by the native speakers. For example, we often hear there is, but in real life you say there is. Yeah. Usually the native speakers will use 2-3 words together, link the word so that become natural. The same thing happens in our language. In Bahasa Jawa, in Bahasa Indonesia, that is the same. In natural speech, usually we will cluster the words, yeah, link one word with another word, so that often makes it difficult for foreign learners of Bahasa Jawa or Bahasa Indonesia. That is the same as in English. By learning English through your favorite songs, actually you also learn that features, yeah, so that you have better understanding, and that also improve your grammar mastery as well, because then you learn, oh, this is the original word is this, but when they are linked together, that looks or that sounds like a single word, but actually there are 3 words clustered together. Yeah, I think that is one good way, and also effectively, not effective, but effectively, that would be beneficial, because you like it, you repeat it, and you learn English without realizing that you learn. You thought that you are only singing, but actually you're learning. Yeah, so that if you make that a habit and you have more songs that you can learn, you can memorize. So that would be good, and that makes also hopefully that you will be able to apply your knowledge in the song structure. I mean, sentence structure in the songs, and practicing in your communication, so that your communication will become more and more natural, like when you are singing. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Prof. And then we have another question from Bu Sri Listiarini. She is actually Universitas Terbuka lecturer. The question is, currently many young children are influenced by the language of YouTube, so that the language is a mixture of their mother tongue and English. As a result, the English teacher has difficulty correcting the child's language that is already wrong. How do we as English teachers deal with this condition?
Well, actually, this child is becoming bilingual. Well, I think the child unconsciously switched code because she didn't know what to say, to fill the slot of the word that he needs. But I think this is a clever way. This is one of the ways of learning a foreign language. So when in a dialogue, in conversation, when you don't know, particularly in the learning process, you can do that, because a language, using the language is for the purpose of communication. So there might be something that, well, because this is in the process, we encourage them to go on working on that, but you give some clarification. Give an example. Don't tell them that she or he is wrong, but just give them the correct example. For example, instead of using a word in Bahasa Indonesia or Bahasa Jawa, and then you fill that gap by giving them the word, the proper word that is needed for that. So that the child hopefully will start realizing. But that has been done through repetitions. So make them some habit. So again, behaviorism is not completely wrong, because you can also make habit formation, particularly in this context. Rather than telling that is wrong, you just give them the correct words and you use them again and again when the children still use that, and then you give the example. And from your example, and then the child will realize, oh, I should say this instead of that. I hope that that answers the question, because in the YouTube, there can be a mixture of different languages, because the purpose is different. But that is what really happens in the world outside there. So rather than saying that it is wrong, again, give a proper example. So again, mistake is not always mistake. That is in the learning process. So give them the proper model, the right model. And hopefully when from time to time the teacher always use that model, then the child will from step by step will learn the proper or the right model. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Prof. And we have our last question from Bu Sumartini from Bandung. What methods should teachers apply in teaching English during online teaching in this pandemic era?
Okay, actually, the method that you use, well, when we refer to the post-method era, probably we would say what way should teachers apply in teaching during the online learning? Well, of course, there are many aspects that we have to consider. First of all, from the point of view of the materials, because you know that different students have different level of mastery, and then from the point of view of their proficiency in using, for example, the gadget, so that this will also influence the online teaching and learning. So probably one way is the flipped classroom that you can use. So before you teach them, or before you have the Google Meet, for example, before you use the meeting online, you have to provide them first with the materials that you're going to teach. So that's what we call the flipped classroom. So you provide them with the materials, give them the time to read, so that during the online teaching and learning, you will be discussing something that they already have some idea, so that there might be problems, different problems coming from different students, but there may be also students who already have only little problem with that, so that we can use for example, the discussion forum, so that students having problem may be assisted by the other students. And in the post-method era, we have to reward, we have to appreciate the collaboration between students. So do not think that you are the only one who knows everything. So that you can ask the students to communicate with each other, so that even before the class, they could already have some discussion with their friends. And then when you have the online meeting, you will be discussing only the problems that they do not know. So that even when there is a problem, you don't have to answer the problem directly, but try to give the problem to the others who may be able to help you. And also, we have to realize, particularly when you teach, older students, I mean the more mature students, that most of them are already well equipped with IT mastery, so that the teachers, the learners or the students may be better, may be more advanced in the mastery of the IT, so that you don't have to feel ashamed, or you don't have to feel shy asking the students for help in case the students have problem and you are not able to help them, and you can use other students as the resource person to solve the problem. So post-method era, post-method teachers should give trust to the potential of their students, so that you are collaborating with the other students. You are not the only knower of the knowledge, but others, particularly the students, can also know better, because those who are accustomed to work on their handphone from the the age of children from the early age, are now capable of doing almost anything related to technology in cell phone, so that do not think that you are the only one knowing everything. You can make them your assistant, in solving the problem. I think that's it, Pak Martini. Thank you.
Professor Sugirin. Considering the time, we are very sorry that we're not able to address all the questions from all the participants. And that's the end of today's public lecture. On behalf of the postgraduate program of the Universitas Terbuka, I'd like to thank Professor Sugirin for giving us very useful knowledge and discussion. And I want to thank all of you, hundreds of English educators and professionals, for joining us in this public lecture. Last but not least, I'd like to remind you all to fill out the feedback form on the given link on the chat box so that you are eligible to get the certificate of the event. You can also download the presentation material on the given link. Thank you all, stay healthy, and have a nice day.
Thank you.
Dengan tuntutan era digital yang semakin pesat, memacu kita untuk terus meningkatkan potensi sumber daya manusia yang terintegrasi dan mampu menunjang produktivitas. Namun, perkembangan yang kian padat tersebut perlu diimbangi dengan solusi pembelajaran yang efektif dan modern yang mampu mengimbangi rutinitas masyarakat masa kini. Sebuah sarana yang mampu mengatasi keterbatasan tempat dan waktu yang menjadi masalah utama bagi banyak orang dalam mengembangkan diri dan peningkatan karir di era digital yang berdampak pada gaya hidup. Universitas Terbuka hadir untuk menjawab masalah tersebut dengan penerapan sistem pembelajaran terbuka dan jarak jauh. Sistem yang terbukti efektif meningkatkan daya jangkau dan pemerataan pendidikan tinggi yang berkualitas bagi seluruh lapisan masyarakat. Sistem pembelajaran Universitas Terbuka memungkinkan para mahasiswa untuk belajar secara fleksibel dan terbuka dengan beberapa keuntungan seperti waktu pendaftaran yang terbuka sepanjang tahun sehingga Anda tidak perlu khawatir untuk terlambat melakukan pendaftaran, ruang, waktu, dan tempat yang fleksibel bagi mahasiswa. Hal ini sangat berguna bagi para mahasiswa yang tetap ingin mengembangkan wawasannya dimanapun dan kapanpun. Materi ajar cetak maupun digital yang mudah diakses di seluruh pelosok Indonesia dan mancanegara. Memberi kesempatan kepada segala golongan dan usia yang siap belajar untuk mengembangkan ilmu dan kemampuannya di segala bidang. Memiliki 39 kantor regional di seluruh Indonesia dan pusat layanan luar negeri yang selalu siap mendukung kegiatan operasional dan jalinan kerjasama dengan berbagai institusi baik nasional dan internasional. Serta dilengkapi dengan berbagai fasilitas penunjang proses pembelajaran seperti UT Radio, UT TV, layanan bantuan belajar, hingga perpustakaan yang dapat diakses secara online. Memiliki 4 fakultas, Fakultas Keguruan dan Ilmu Pendidikan, Fakultas Hukum Ilmu Sosial dan Ilmu Politik, Fakultas Ekonomi, Fakultas Sains dan Teknologi, dengan lebih dari 35 program studi sarjana dan program Pascasarjana. Universitas Terbuka, making higher education open to all.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.